When Trump accused Obama of lacking Christian values on live television, no one expected Obama to respond with a single Bible verse. A verse so powerful it silenced the entire hall and left Trump visibly shaken. The camera lights were nearly blinding, sweeping across a sea of faces inside a packed civic center in Phoenix, Arizona. This wasn't just another campaign appearance. It was a nationally televised town hall, the kind replayed on late-night news and etched into public memory. Every seat was filled from the floor to the highest balcony. Reporters lined the walls, cameras raised, laptops open, fingers glowing as they prepared to capture every word. Even viewers at home could feel the energy through the screen, the tension that comes just before something explodes. President Donald Trump sat at center stage, posture rigid, chin lifted, hands lightly clasped as if ready to spar with words. To his right, former President Barack Obama waited calmly, almost motionless, as though he had done this 1,000 times before. He leaned back in his chair, shoulders loose, eyes drifting not toward Trump, but across the crowd, as if already speaking to them in his mind. The audience was split. Some wore red caps and slogan-covered shirts. Others dressed simply, there for Obama, clutching programs like keepsakes. When the moderator opened the event, the noise was overwhelming. Cheers collided with jeers, whistles with applause. This wasn't a town hall, it was an arena. What struck many watching wasn't just the volume, but the contrast between the two men. Trump leaned forward, animated, like a boxer before the opening bell. Obama remained measured, leaning back, as if time itself moved slower around him. Two leaders, two styles, one stage. The moderator, a journalist from a Phoenix affiliate, wasted no time. Turning to Trump, he said the country was watching both of them, and the question many Americans were asking was about values, the moral foundation that guides leadership. What did he want to say to the man sitting across from him? Trump smiled tightly and gripped the microphone. His voice came sharp and fast. He said people talk about Obama's legacy, about his so-called values, but you can't lead a country if your morals are questionable. And, he added, Obama's morals had always been in question. A gasp rippled through the hall. Some in the crowd jumped to their feet, applauding, fists raised. Others sat frozen, mouths half open. Trump wasn't holding back. His tone sounded like a prosecutor laying out a case before a jury of millions. Obama didn't move. He didn't flinch or blink. He rested one hand on his knee and let out a slow breath, eyes still scanning the audience. It wasn't just restraint. It was strategy. Anyone who had watched him for years could see he was waiting. Sensing the tension, the moderator turned. He asked Obama if he wanted to respond, but before Obama even touched the microphone, the crowd erupted again. A woman near the front stood up and shouted for him to show who he really was. Applause thundered behind her. On the other side, Trump supporters booed and chanted his name. The camera swept across the divided faces, capturing raw emotion. America's split-screen politics, live and unfiltered. Obama finally leaned forward, fingers lacing around the microphone. He didn't speak right away. He let the noise rise, then slowly fade. Silence is a rare weapon, and he used it carefully. In that pause, viewers at home could almost hear their own breathing. Families watching from living rooms across the country were glued to their screens, waiting. Would he strike back? Would he defend himself? Instead, he smiled. A small, almost private smile, letting the room know he wasn't rattled. He began softly, his voice steady. He said they were all there because they loved the country, and when you love something, you sometimes see it differently. You argue, you fight. But leadership, he said, isn't about who can shout the loudest. It's about who can live with themselves when the shouting stops. The words landed heavy, like a stone hitting water. Trump's smile faltered. The crowd leaned in. The moderator shifted, sensing the change in the air. He tried to interject, but Obama lifted his hand slightly, signaling he wasn't finished. Everyone knew the real moment was coming. What no one expected was that Obama would use a single line, not of politics, but of scripture, to flip the entire exchange. Trump leaned forward, microphone clenched tightly, eyes narrowed toward Obama as if he had been waiting all night for this opening. The hall buzzed with tension, but it only energized him. Conflict was his element. He brushed off Obama's calm words, saying they sounded nice, like something read from a card. Then he leaned in harder, saying people questioned Obama's morals, his values, what he stood for. Real Christian values, real American values, he said, were not in Obama at all. Gasps filled the room, followed by cheers and jeers. On one side, men in baseball caps jumped up, clapping and shouting as if a knockout blow had landed. On the other, Obama supporters booed so loudly the moderator raised his hands, trying to restore order. Trump didn't slow down. He jabbed a finger toward Obama, accusing him of talking about faith only when it made him look good, hiding behind polished words while his actions told a different story. America, he said, deserved a leader with clear morals. Obama tilted his head slightly, as if the accusation itself wasn't the point. A woman's voice rang out from the crowd, cutting through the noise, saying Obama was more Christian than Trump. Applause followed. Trump's lips curled into a half smile, part irritation, part satisfaction. He gestured toward the woman and said that was the problem, that people were fooled by speeches and appearances. He claimed he wasn't fooled, and America shouldn't be either. The moderator looked uneasy, trying to steer things back. But Trump cut him off. He said America had been played for years and accused Obama of acting like a saint. He mocked the idea of quoting scripture, daring Obama to bring faith into the debate. The irony hung thick in the air. Trump was pushing him, challenging him, almost inviting him to respond with the Bible. The crowd could feel it. Viewers at home could feel it. This was no longer about policy, it was personal. In living rooms, diners, and late-night restaurants across the country, people leaned closer to their screens. Parents held their breath as their children watched. This wasn't just politics anymore. It was two versions of leadership colliding. Trump raised his voice again, asking Obama what morals guided his decisions, firing question after question, like punches thrown without gloves. The crowd answered in waves of applause and shouts. Chaos filled the room, the kind of storm Trump thrived in. Obama still didn't move. He let the accusations linger in the air. Trump's chest rose with intensity. Obama's shoulders stayed relaxed, hands folded loosely in his lap. It was theater, but it was also a test of composure. Finally, the moderator turned to Obama, almost pleading. He said the country wanted to hear his response. The room quieted just enough for Obama to lean forward, microphone in hand. He glanced down briefly, then looked up at Trump, then out at the audience, as if choosing his words with care. His expression stayed unreadable for a moment. It looked as though he might let the provocation pass, as if he might choose silence instead of engagement. But the slight tightening of his jaw, the faint rise of his eyebrows, told a different story. He was going to respond. And when he did, it wouldn't be casual. It would leave a mark. First, though, Obama would remind everyone who he was by how he entered the moment. Calm, deliberate, completely in control. The town hall had reached a boiling point. Trump's words still echoed through the rafters, stirring anger and applause in equal measure. The moderator looked worn down, gripping his pen as if it could somehow steady the chaos swirling around him. Cameras zoomed in on Obama's face, searching for a reaction, waiting for something, anything, that could cut through the noise. But Obama didn't rush. He adjusted the microphone slowly, the movement itself signaling that he was about to speak. The crowd began to quiet in pockets, like waves pulling back before the tide. He cleared his throat gently and leaned forward. First, he said, his voice steady and unraised. He wanted to thank the people of Phoenix for showing up. Democracy, he said, doesn't work if people don't show up. The hall responded with applause, not wild, but warm. The words were simple, yet heavy with meaning. He wasn't just answering Trump. He was speaking to everyone watching, from the upper rows to families gathered around televisions across the country. Obama glanced briefly at Trump, then back toward the moderator. Now, he continued, the president had raised a serious question about morals and values, and that was worth talking about. Trump's smirk shifted into something sharper, part irritation, part anticipation. He shifted in his chair, fingers tapping the armrest, as if daring Obama to stumble. But Obama's tone never wavered. He said he had never claimed to be perfect. None of us are. Leadership, he explained, doesn't start with perfection. It starts with intention. It starts with the values that guide you when no cameras are rolling and no applause is waiting. The room leaned in with him. Obama allowed space between his sentences, letting silence amplify his words. He wasn't trying to overpower Trump. He was pacing himself, like someone who knew this moment wasn't about speed, but endurance. He lifted his gaze toward the audience and spoke about where his values came from. From his mother, who taught him kindness. From his grandparents in Hawaii, who worked hard every day without seeking praise. And yes, from Scripture. Because whether someone calls themselves Christian, follows another faith, or follows none at all, there are truths that speak to every human heart. The words resonated through the hall. Even those who opposed him felt the sincerity. Some folded their arms tighter, but they listened all the same. Trump cut in sharply, lifting his microphone. He mocked the tone, saying, "Here we go, another sermon." He said Obama had years to prove those values, and told him not to act holy now. Scattered laughter rose from Trump's supporters. Obama didn't react. He nodded slightly, acknowledging the interruption without engaging it, then turned back to the audience. "When someone questions your morals," he said calmly, "the easy response is anger. It's trading insult for insult. But the harder, more important question is this: what do my actions say? And what do the people who lived under my decisions say? Because leadership," he continued, "isn't measured by what you say in a debate. It's measured by the lives touched when the lights are off." A voice in the crowd shouted in agreement. Applause swelled, growing strong enough to drown out the remaining heckles. Cameras cut to faces across the room. A young woman wiping her eyes. An older man clapping with both hands raised. Obama lifted a hand gently, easing the energy back down. Then he turned directly toward Trump's claim. He said the president talked about not living by the Bible. He added that he didn't need to carry it like a prop to know what's in it. He tried to live by it, and it teaches that strength isn't about shouting. Strength is about humility, integrity, sacrifice. The room fell silent again. Even Trump seemed momentarily caught off guard, leaning back as if recalibrating. The moderator broke the pause softly, asking whether Obama was saying his faith guided his decisions in office. Obama smiled faintly. He said faith, like anyone's, is a compass. It doesn't mean you never make mistakes. It means you try to do right by people, even when it isn't popular, even when it costs you politically. That, he said, was what his mother would have wanted. That was what his faith asked of him. The hall erupted once more. Applause louder than before, surging through the space. Trump tightened his grip on the microphone, jaw set, leaning forward, ready to respond. But the moderator raised a hand, signaling that Obama still had the floor. Obama leaned back in his chair, shoulders loose again, eyes calm. He had set the tone. He had drawn a line without raising his voice. The crowd knew it. Trump knew it. Viewers at home knew it too, yet Obama hadn't delivered his sharpest response. Not yet. The verse that would freeze the room and shift the entire night still waited. This town hall was no longer just another political event. It had become something deeper. A clash not of policies, but of principles. Cameras captured every bead of sweat, every flicker of expression, every pause heavy enough to change the air. Trump had thrown punch after punch. Obama had absorbed them all without raising his voice. Now the entire country seemed to be waiting for the counterstrike. Obama leaned forward again, resting his elbows on his knees, microphone steady in his hands. He didn't rush. The crowd hushed without being told. A few voices lingered at the edges, but even they quieted, as if sensing the weight of what was coming. He glanced at the moderator, then at Trump, who shifted impatiently, fingers tapping against his chair. Obama let the silence stretch, filling it with expectation. "Let me tell you something," he began, voice controlled and even. "When you grow up without much, you learn the value of listening before you speak. You learn to let people show you who they are by how they treat others when nobody's watching." The words hung in the air, deliberate and unhurried. He acknowledged that some people in the hall didn't like him, and some watching at home didn't trust him. That, he said, was democracy. But he had never tried to divide people by questioning their faith, because faith is between a person and God. None of us, he said, has the right to stand as judge and jury over another person's soul. Murmurs spread across the room. Some clapped softly. Others nodded. Even those who disagreed felt the weight of his words. Trump leaned forward abruptly, cutting in, insisting Obama had done things that hurt the church and telling him not to play innocent. The moderator quickly stepped in, asking Trump to let him finish. Trump leaned back, scowling, but the interruption only made Obama's calm appear stronger. Obama didn't react. He looked out across the sea of faces, then directly into the camera. His voice dropped lower, almost intimate. He shared something he had carried with him for years. Long before politics, when he was a young man in Chicago, he worked with church groups helping communities that felt forgotten. He saw mothers raising children without support. He saw workers losing jobs they'd held for decades. And he saw how faith gave them strength when everything else was falling apart. It wasn't politics that gave them hope, he said. It was scripture. It was prayer. It was the belief that character mattered, even when no one else believed in them. The hall grew quieter still. The crowd leaned forward, drawn in. A camera focused on a woman clutching a program to her chest, eyes shining. Obama paused, letting the memory settle. "That's why," he continued, "when someone questions my morals, I don't feel the need to shout back. Because I know the life I've lived, I know the people I've stood beside, and I know the words that guided me when I was lost." He stopped again. A long silence followed, the kind that stretched far beyond the hall and into living rooms across the country, where families sat motionless, barely blinking. Obama drew in a slow breath, then let it out. He lifted his eyes, not toward Trump, but across the crowd as a whole. His voice softened, carrying a rhythm that felt almost like a sermon, without ever becoming one. "There's a verse I go back to often," he said. "A verse that reminds me what real strength looks like, and I think it's worth sharing tonight." The moderator leaned back in his chair, sensing the shift. Trump's eyes narrowed. The crowd straightened almost in unison, as if the room itself knew something defining was about to happen. Obama brought the microphone closer, paused, and waited. The silence turned electric. So full, so heavy, that even the cameras seemed to hesitate. In homes from Bakersfield to Omaha, viewers felt the tension through their screens. Phones buzzed with messages asking if others were watching. In diners across Texas, televisions went quiet as waitresses stopped pouring coffee to catch the moment. Then, Obama spoke. The book of Proverbs says, "The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity." The room froze for a heartbeat that felt endless. No cheers, no boos, no whispers, just silence. The words landed like a stone, solid and immovable, echoing against the walls and sinking deep into everyone who heard them. Obama lowered the microphone slightly. His face stayed neutral. He didn't smile or gloat. He simply let the verse exist on its own, confident it needed no embellishment. Silence can't last forever. And when it finally broke, the reaction shook the room in ways neither man expected. For a moment, the town hall seemed to stop breathing. The verse hung in the air, unhurried, undramatized, simply spoken. People glanced at one another. Some mouths hung open. Others stayed tightly shut, as if afraid to speak out loud. A camera swept the audience and caught a young man with his hands clasped, quietly repeating the words to himself, testing how they sounded when spoken again. Trump blinked hard, leaning back in his chair. The smirk was gone. His lips parted as if he had a response ready, but nothing came out. He tightened his grip on the microphone, yet he didn't interrupt. Obama remained perfectly still. The pause stretched, deliberate, and heavy. He didn't explain the verse. He didn't raise his voice. He let its meaning do the work. Finally, he lifted the microphone again. "Integrity guides us," he said. "That's what Scripture teaches. Not anger, not ego, integrity. And when you forget that, when leadership becomes about you instead of the people you serve, you lose your way. That's true for anyone, no matter who you are or what title you hold." Applause began softly, a few claps near the front rows. Then it spread like a wave, growing louder, rolling through the hall. People rose to their feet. Some cheered, some wiped away tears. The sound swelled so strong that Obama couldn't continue even if he wanted to. Across the country, families leaned closer to their screens. In El Paso, a woman whispered to her husband, asking if he had heard that. College students replayed the moment on their phones, shaking their heads in disbelief. It wasn't that the verse was unfamiliar. Millions had read it before. It was the timing, the delivery, the calm that stood in such stark contrast to the storm that came before. When the applause finally faded, Obama spoke again. "Faith isn't something you wear like a badge when it's convenient," he said. "It's not something you pull out to win applause. It's how you live when nobody's watching. It's how you treat people who can give you nothing in return. That's what this verse means to me. And that's why, when my morals are questioned, I don't feel the need to shout back. I'd rather let my life speak for itself." The moderator shifted in his seat, clearly affected, but careful to remain neutral. He looked toward Trump, expecting him to jump in. Trump stayed rigid, fingers tapping against the microphone, expression dark. Obama turned slightly toward him, not confrontational, just steady. "Mr. President, you asked about my morals. That's my answer. You don't have to agree with me, but you can't take away the words that have guided me all these years. Words older than both of us. Words that will outlast both of us." The crowd erupted again, some rising for a brief standing ovation. The energy felt different now. Not just support from his side, but a sense of respect from people who hadn't applauded earlier. Trump finally raised his microphone. His voice came out sharper, louder than necessary, as if forcing control back into the moment. He dismissed it as a nice speech, said Obama was good with words, but insisted that quoting a verse didn't make him the moral compass of the country. He pointed to Obama's record, claiming the truth was already known. The words landed, but the sting was gone. The timing had shifted. The verse had already done its work, cutting deeper than any long defense could. Even some who had cheered for Trump earlier were quieter now, uncertain. The moderator leaned forward carefully and addressed Trump, noting the audience's strong reaction and asking if he wanted to respond directly to the scripture. Trump frowned, adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and said he respected the Bible, but quoting it didn't erase years of bad leadership. A bit of applause came from his side of the room, but it lacked force. Cameras caught a young woman behind him shaking her head, whispering to the person next to her. The contrast was unmistakable. Obama leaned back once more, resting the microphone in his lap. His expression stayed composed, but the atmosphere told the story. The ground had shifted. The moderator exhaled and moved the program forward. "Gentlemen," he said, "we'll transition to questions from the audience shortly, but before we do, it felt like everyone understood they had just witnessed a moment people would be talking about for a long time." The crowd clapped again, cameras flashing as the image of the two men on stage burned itself into memory. One calm, one unsettled. But the real test wasn't inside the hall. It was in the reaction that would explode across the country within hours, reshaping how millions would remember this night. The cameras lingered on Trump's face. The familiar confidence, the sharp jabs, the practiced smirks. For the first time, The dominance he usually commanded felt cracked. The verse had landed harder than he expected. Obama hadn't raised his voice, hadn't attacked, hadn't even defended himself with policy. He had simply quoted scripture, and in doing so, he had made the accusation against him feel small. Trump wasn't the type to let silence settle. He straightened in his chair, leaned forward, and pulled the microphone close. His voice came out louder than before, balanced somewhere between anger and performance. He told the crowd that quoting a single line from the Bible proved nothing. Anyone could do that, he said. It didn't mean you lived it. And he insisted Obama hadn't. His supporters clapped and cheered, but the response felt thinner now, scattered rather than overwhelming. The cameras cut to the audience, revealing uncertainty. Arms crossed, faces thoughtful, eyes drifting back to Obama, still processing the weight of the verse. Trump pushed harder. He repeated that Obama talked like a preacher. But when you looked at the results, the story was different. Churches struggling, families struggling, borders open, jobs leaving. If that was guided by scripture, he said, then maybe Obama had been reading the wrong Bible. Laughter broke out from his side of the crowd, but it sounded strained, more habit than humor. Obama didn't interrupt. His hands stayed loosely folded in his lap. His gaze rested on Trump, steady and measured, not smug, like a professor watching a student argue past the point. Sensing the imbalance, the moderator stepped in. He asked Trump whether he was saying scripture had no place in the discussion, especially since he had challenged Obama's faith directly earlier. Trump waved it off, insisting of course it had a place. He claimed he respected the Bible more than anyone, that he had read it and quoted it many times. Then he jabbed a finger toward Obama and accused him of using it like a shield. Fake, he said. Totally fake. Gasps rippled through the hall, louder than before. Calling another man's faith fake on national television carried weight, and the room felt it immediately. Obama slowly lifted his microphone. His voice cut cleanly through the noise, calm but firm. He said Trump could call him many things, but fake wasn't one of them. The people of the country knew who he was. They had watched him for decades. They had seen his flaws, his family, his faith in action. And the truth was, he didn't need to prove it to Trump. The people had already lived it. The audience erupted. Some stood. Some clapped until their hands turned red. Trump clenched his jaw and cut in, accusing Obama of leaving the country divided and weaker. He said Obama couldn't sit there quoting verses and pretend to be the moral high ground. Obama waited for the applause to fade, then leaned forward once more. His voice never rose. He said, "Division doesn't begin with disagreement. It begins when leaders pit neighbor against neighbor, when they turn faith into a weapon instead of a guide." He admitted he had never been perfect, but he had never questioned another man's soul on national television. That, he said, was a line he would never cross. The reaction was immediate. Applause, shouts, cheers. Even some who had supported Trump earlier leaned back, visibly struck by the contrast. The moderator turned to Trump again, voice low but pressing, and asked if he wanted to respond. Trump exhaled sharply into the microphone and said he didn't need to. The American people, he claimed, already knew the truth. They knew what he stood for. They knew what he had delivered. He repeated that quoting one verse changed nothing. It was meant to sound final. Instead, it sounded defensive. Cameras zoomed in on his face, catching the tight grip on the microphone, the faint flush in his cheeks. Obama leaned back again, shoulders relaxed, a faint half-smile appearing briefly. He didn't gloat, he didn't speak. He let the moment sit where it was. The moderator cleared his throat and addressed the audience, saying they would move to audience questions. But it was clear the exchange had struck a nerve. Applause rose once more as cameras scanned the crowd. Some people cheered. Others sat quietly, thoughtful, shaken by what they had just seen. Beyond the hall, the moment was already spreading. On phones, in living rooms, in diners and airports. Clips were being shared and replayed again and again. Obama's verse traveled faster than any rebuttal ever could. By the time the town hall wrapped up, the story was already racing ahead of the event itself. Reporters typed furiously, headlines forming before the candidates even left the stage. Camera crews scrambled for reaction shots, capturing raw emotion, while anchors whispered instructions through earpieces. Within hours, major networks had assembled their clips. One banner declared that Obama had fired back with a Bible verse, stunning the crowd. Another framed it as a heated confrontation over morals. One channel played the exchange nearly uninterrupted, commentators marveling at how a single line of scripture had flipped the entire atmosphere. Social media ignited. Feeds filled with Obama's calm delivery, the verse displayed in bold text across countless posts. Hashtags spread instantly. Live streams from Phoenix flooded timelines, comments pouring in faster than anyone could track. One viewer wrote that the verse hit harder than anything they'd heard in years. Another argued that quoting scripture didn't make a leader righteous. The debate exploded in every direction at once. But no matter where people landed, one thing was clear. That night in Phoenix had shifted something. A single verse, spoken calmly, had cut through noise, accusation, and spectacle. And long after the crowd went home and the stage lights dimmed, the words still echoed.